Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is Monday, 15th July 2024, and today we have some important news articles from different newspapers. All these articles are very important from exam perspective. So one by one, we'll try to discuss all those important articles in a very detailed manner. And before discussing them, yesterday I've given one practice question that was with respect to the demographic dividend. I hope all of you knew about the concept of demographic dividend. Now, when we talk about the demographic dividend, it essentially means that the working age population, right, the largest number of a country's population are in the working age, and that is known as the demographic dividend of our country. Now if you look into the demographic profile of our country, now a largest number of our population are in the working age. For example, 14 to 64 years of age group are considered as a working age population, and therefore India is the largest country in the world with a huge demographic dividend. However, if we use this demographic dividend in a fair and correct manner, this demographic dividend would contribute to the rapid economic growth and development of our country. Now, following the statement, which of the following statements best describes the term demographic dividend? So option A, a rise in the gross employment ratio of a country due to government policies. Of course, this is not the correct answer, right? So due to government policies, if employment ratio significantly increases, that cannot be considered as a demographic dividend. And if you look into the option B, a rise in the standard of living of the people due to the growth of alternative livelihood practices, no, this is also not the correct or it is not best describing the concept of demographic dividend. So however, if you look at option C, a rise in the rate of economic growth due to higher share of working age population, people in population, right? So this is the appropriate and the correct answer for this concept of demographic dividend, because as I have already told you that demographic dividend actually means that, so if you take all the population of a country, majority of the population are in the working age, 14 to 64 years of age group, and if we use the working age population, if we use the demographic dividend in a perfect manner, that could contribute to the country's economic growth and economic development, right? So a share in the rate of economic growth due to a higher share of the working age population, people in the total population, and that would mean a demographic dividend. And of course, if you look at the option D, a rise in the rate of literacy due to the development of educational institutions in different parts of the country. So this is not appropriately describing the concept of demographic dividend. So demographic dividend, as I have already told you, 14 to 64 years of age group, they are considered as working age population, and any country with a huge working age population would have a demographic dividend to reap, and demographic dividend can be translated into economic growth and economic development over a period of time. And in fact, according to some reports, India would retain this demographic window for another 25 to 30 years, and therefore it is very important in these 30 years. So we need to use the demographic dividend in a best possible manner that could contribute to the economic growth and economic development of our country. So you can see here, right? So this is a flow chart with respect to the demographic dividend, right? So young working age population in the age category of 16 to 64 years, right? So 16 to 64 years of a age group, and if we identify all the young working age population, and if we give them better education, better healthcare, training, skills, and reskilling, upskilling of those working age population, so that would substantially contribute to economic and industrial development with a lot of potential opportunities, and it would also increases the employment opportunities for the people, social security, social safety nets for the employers, and increase in the formal employment opportunities also for the people. So that would substantially contributes to boost in productivity, boost in exports. Due to the salaries received by these workers, demand in the economy substantially increases. Demand attracts a lot of investments within India from the foreign direct investment also. So that would contributes to overall economic prosperity, economic growth and economic development of our country, right? So whenever you are being asked a question with respect to the demographic dividend, so it is always advised to draw such flowcharts in the answer to make your answer more and more impactful in the mains examination, right? So next, today I have one more practice question, that is with respect to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Consider the following statements regarding the International Atomic Energy Agency. First option about the International Atomic Energy Agency is, so it was established as an autonomous organization under the UN statute. Second option, it inhibits the complete use of nuclear technologies and nuclear energy. And third statement, it reports to the both United Nations General Assembly and United Nations Security Council. So you have to identify the correct answer from the given options and try to answer this question in the comment section. Remember, international organizations like International Atomic Energy Agency, International Energy Agency are very important from your exam perspective, and you should know when they were established, what are their key functions, and whether India is a member of such organizations or not. It is a very important, because previously also there were number of questions based on such organizations, right? So try to answer this question in the comment section. And without any delay, let's start our discussion with respect to today's important news articles. The first article that we are going to discuss is about tapping agriculture's potential to create more jobs. Now, if I can tell you, India's growth is known as jobless growth. So India's growth is very often called as jobless growth. Now, why India's growth is called as jobless growth? Because the growth has been not creating adequate employment opportunities for the youth, right? So just we have discussed that India is a country with a huge demographic dividend, and that demographic dividend should be used in an appropriate and specific and efficient manner. But if even though we are registering 7% growth rate per annum, that in fact, if you look at this growth rate and when you compare this growth rate with other developed countries' growth rate, it is a very good growth rate for India, especially at this point of time. 7% growth rate is a very good growth rate, because we are just recovering from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though we are registering 7% of the growth rate right from 1991, when LPG reforms were undertaken, the growth rate has not been creating adequate employment opportunities. There are some reasons for that. So whatever investments that are coming into Indian economy, most of these investments are in the technology intensive sector, right? So technology intensive sector will not create adequate employment opportunities. Rather, if we invest more on the labor intensive sector such as textiles, leather, so all those sectors are known as the labor intensive sector, such as manufacturing industry, and MSMEs are the labor intensive sectors. So due to the poor presence of the labor intensive sectors and higher investments in the technology intensive sectors, so India's growth rate very often not creating adequate employment opportunities. So because of that reason, we can call India's growth is a jobless growth, because it has not been creating adequate employment opportunities. And the other thing, so if you look at the transition or the progress that each country makes from primary sector, tertiary, secondary and tertiary sector, right? So agriculture is considered as the primary sector. So over a period of time, from agriculture, industry would develop, and from industry, service sector would develop, right? So this is the transition of an economy in the present developed countries in the West. So first they relied on agriculture, and then they focused on industry, and from industry, service sector taken over. But if you look at Indian economy, so Indian economy had been facing some structural issues. So we completely skipped this industry or manufacturing stage of the economic transformation. Rather, we directly jumped from agriculture to the service sector, and that is another factor which lead to the failure in creating gainful employment opportunities for the existing workforce. However, so if we talk about the data with respect to agriculture sector, still 48% of India's population are directly and indirectly dependent on agriculture sector, and agriculture sector had a huge potential. It has a huge potential to create employment opportunities also. So we should not rely on the industry for creation of employment opportunities. Rather, we should also explore opportunities from the agriculture sector. So what are the prevalent opportunities in the agriculture sector? So how the jobs can be created in the agriculture sector? So that is the new idea. So that should be essentially focused upon, because you very often come across the concept called feminization of the agriculture, right? So this feminization of agriculture actually means that increasing women's participation in the agricultural activities, and agriculture also has a lot of potential to increase women workforce participation. So women workforce participation has been declining over a period of time, but agriculture actually provides a fair opportunity for the women to increase their participation in the agriculture sector, and it could also make them self-reliant and economically independent over a period of time. Now we will understand the context of this particular article. The context is that the number of workers in informal sector has been declining, or unincorporated sector enterprises has been declining over a period of time, particularly in the sector manufacturing, right? So industry and manufacturing is considered as the secondary sector. However, the problem here is that industry and manufacturing sector are labor intensive sector. So those sectors can create a huge employment opportunities, but the concern is that recent times the industry and manufacturing sector employment opportunities are also substantially declining, while on the other hand there is a marginal increase in a few areas such as trade and other services in the service sector, but the employment opportunities in the manufacturing and industry have been declining. So therefore this particular trend in declining employment opportunities in the labor intensive industry and manufacturing sector have raised concerns about the role that informal sector as an employment provider and its resilience for and amid the economic challenges, right? So how informal sector within the agriculture, within the secondary sector can actually create a potential employment opportunities, particularly with respect to declining formal employment opportunities for the individuals, and in this way agriculture actually provides a huge potential, a huge opportunity, right? So we will understand this, right? So there is a decline or shift towards formal sector and structural transformation, right? So this one, decline in unincorporated sector employment opportunities, and therefore it has raised concerns about the formal sector creating gainful employment opportunities for existing workforce. Now understand, we have just discussed demographic dividend. So India no doubt has the largest demographic dividend, but we need to provide adequate employment opportunities through private sector or the government sector. We need to create adequate employment opportunities, otherwise the demographic dividend go wasteful, and therefore creating employment opportunities is very, very important, and in this respect entrepreneurship should be adequately focused. So we need to understand this sector wise analysis of workforce. The workforce in the manufacturing and industry within the unincorporated sector enterprises has been actually declined in recent times. So declined from 3.60 crore to 3.06 crore. So it is being evident from the given data that the manufacturing sector employment capability has been declined from 3.60 crore to 3.06 crore. However, there is a stagnation and marginal increase in some other sectors such as trade and other services. So they actually saw a slight increase from 3.87 crore employment opportunities to 3.90 crore workers, while other services also have shown a minor rise from 3.65 crore to 4 crore employment opportunities. So it essentially means that we have discussed in the context that service sector and trade have seen a marginal increase in the employment opportunities, but the concern is that the labor intensive industry and manufacturing sector have seen the declining levels of employment opportunities, and that is particularly a concern for a country like India with a huge demographic dividend, with a huge population in the working age. They are actively seeking employment opportunities. And the other thing, we need to understand why there has been a substantial declining in the potential of these manufacturing and industry in providing employment opportunities. So it is because of the number of reasons, right? So recently Indian economy has been recovered or still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. So that thing we need to understand. So before the COVID-19 pandemic also, so Indian economy faced some structural shocks, such as demonetization was implemented, and demonetization was a big blow to the economic growth and development in our country. And apart from that, GST was also implemented in our country. And after demonetization and GST, we have also seen 2 years of continuous lockdowns because of the COVID-19 pandemic. All these factors have contributed to the contraction, and it even impacted the small scale enterprises, MSMEs, manufacturing industries significantly, and that is the reason there is a decline in the employment opportunities, or decline in the capacity to create employment opportunities by the manufacturing and the industries. So in this context, we need to understand that there is a need for a shift towards the formal sector, and structural transformation in the economy is also necessary, because the structural transformation and formalization of the workforce would actually help Indian economy by creating a better employment opportunities or quality gainful employment opportunities for the existing workforce that comes with social security and social safety nets. So first thing, we need to understand that there is a need for the formalization of the workforce. So according to some data, 90% of India's total workforce in the informal category or unorganized sector. So we very often knew that when we talk about this unorganized sector, so the problem is that unorganized sector will not have, better working conditions. So the problem is that there are no better working conditions for the workers, no insurance facilities in case if anything happens to any of the worker in this working conditions, and no pension after their retirement or old age. So ideally we can say that there is no social security and even no social safety for the individuals, no social safety also, right? So in this context, we very often, apart from that, the other thing with respect to the unorganized sector, there is also no job security as well, right? So no job security. So these are the main problems with the unorganized sector. But if you look into the structure of Indian economy, 90% of total workforce are in the informal sector or unorganized sector. So of course, if we formalize the existing workforce, if we make them an organized workforce, there will be better working conditions for the workers, and there will be insurance facilities, pension facilities, and job security for the workers, right? So it ultimately ensures social security and social safety nets, and this will also overall improve the living standards of the people, and also they would come out of the chronic cycle of the poverty. So that's why it is very important that we need to emphasize on the formalization of the workforce. However, the problem is that there is a lack of the formal sector expansion in recent times, and even any shift towards the formal employment is seen as a beneficial. Why it is beneficial, we have already discussed, right? So there are number of benefits with the formalization of the workforce, and a formalization of workforce even offer higher productivity and better wages for the workers who have been engaged. However, it is not free from the challenges when we are trying to formalize the existing unorganized workforce into formal workforce, there are a number of challenges that we face. And in fact, informal sector, where 90% of the workers are engaged, also facing number of challenges, such as lower productivity, lower wages per the workers who have been engaged. And informal sector so very often uses less technology, and less technology, they cannot boost the production and productivities, and it also poses challenges with respect to the structural transformation in the economy, right? So it overall poses challenges to the structural transformation of the economy. Now whenever you look into the informal economy, right, so informal economy, so it is true that workers who are part of the informal economy are actually paid lower wages. So lower wages, no social security for the workers, and apart from no social security for the workers, no job security also. So this will be the another major problem with the informal sector. And also the productivity or the production of the informal sector is very low compared to its formal sector counterparts, because very often they lack technology, and apart from technology they also lack the necessary capital, because very often they don't have access to the institutional credit facilities, and that would be another problem. And very often these challenges are faced by the micro, small and medium enterprises, and in order to revive employment opportunities, we need to revive micro, small and medium enterprises, and that is very important because they have a huge potential of employment generation. And apart from that, so when we try to create more employment opportunities, when we wanted to make the existing workforce a formal workforce, it is very important that we need to emphasize on skill development and education, healthcare. So this is very very important. Education and skill development is very very important to make sure that all students who passed out and who are looking for the employment opportunities, they can readily get employed if they have necessary skills. Okay, so the informal sector's limitations actually highlight the necessity for skill development to match the demands of high productivity sectors such as manufacturing and the service sectors. So however, so we need to understand the role of agriculture sector in the employment generation, right? So see, very often in India, the potential of agriculture in creation of employment opportunities is neglected, or we can say it is overlooked, because agriculture sector has a very we can say that unlimited opportunities in creating employment opportunities for the rural youth, for the women. For example, in recent times, government has been increasingly stressing on the food processing sector. So food processing sector has a huge potential within the agriculture sector. So apart from food processing sector, we can talk about the marine food export. This will be another opportunity within the agriculture sector. And after that, we can also talk about the bioenergy generation in the agriculture through the residue, through agri residue. So agri residue can be used to generate bioenergy. And apart from that, so there's a huge opportunities for the entrepreneurship, and youth can be engaged in vermicomposting. So vermicomposting would make agriculture organic and more sustainable. And apart from that, so we can also talk about the aquaculture or inland fisheries, sericulture, that is silk worm rearing, and apiculture, so that is with respect to honeybee, poultry farming and dairy farming. So these sectors are evergreen sectors. There are a lot of opportunities, and in fact women can also play a very important role in all these sectors. So therefore we cannot forget the role that agriculture sector can actually play in Indian economy, right? So you can see that from this image, agriculture sector is the largest employment providing sector in India as of now, because around 48% of India's workforce have been engaged in the agriculture sector alone, and it has also been providing food supplies to the expanding population, contributing capital formation in various other sectors, and it also contributing to the national income, per capita income, and even providing raw materials to different other sectors. And even we are started importing the agri products to other countries, food grains to other countries, because of the shortage in food crisis and increasing food security concerns across the world. So therefore, Indian agriculture, without a doubt, it is an evergreen sector with a lot of potential. And first and foremost, we need to focus on enhancing the agricultural productivity. It is very important. When we enhance the agricultural productivity, we would have the surplus, and with the surplus we can meet the food security requirements through the public distribution system, or maintaining buffer stocks, and even export of these food grains, right? So apart from that, when farmer have a higher productivity, so agriculture would be more and more profitable, and that would substantially increases area under agriculture, and it would also result in doubling farmers income in rural areas. When farmers incomes are doubled, agriculture become profitable, the living standards of the people in rural areas will significantly increase, and they come out of the chronic cycle of poverty. So that is another major challenge, and the rural consumption substantially increases, and overall that would give a thrust or boost to the economic growth and development. So however, we should not forget that agriculture has a huge potential in the employment creation, as we have already discussed different sectors with a huge potential in employment generation. So however, a vision of agriculture as a new industry, so we need to understand how the potential of agriculture sector can be tapped to create a large scale employment opportunities. That is very, very important, right? So we need to tap that particular potential. Promoting agriculture as a source of processed goods can replicate the success of sectors like sugar mills and dairies in adding value and even creating the local employment opportunities. However, agriculture sector, without understanding the problems and bringing in necessary reforms, it is not possible that we can create a significant or substantial employment opportunities in the agriculture sector, right? So it is very important that we need to identify the shortcomings in the agriculture sector. We should boost infrastructure in the agriculture sector. So accordingly, we need to go ahead so that the potential of agriculture sector in creating large scale employment opportunities can actually be tapped in. So next important topic, so that is with respect to the urban Naxalism. Now we, in a very detailed manner, understand what is this urban Naxalism. So in news, we very often hear about the urban Naxalism, but in this article, we'll try to understand what is the urban Naxalism, and what are the concerns with respect to the urban Naxalism, why universities and urban areas have been becoming centers of sympathizers for the left-wing extremism. So this urban Naxalism is very often associated with the left-wing extremism. So that is prevalent in majority of the states in India. So for example, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Northern Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Maharashtra. So in these states, Naxalism is still prevalent. However, it is expected that some educated Indians, even students, have been actively providing indirect support to the left-wing extremism, and most of these educated Indians and students were sympathizers to the cause of the left-wing extremism, and therefore they are either directly or indirectly providing support to the left-wing extremism. So we will understand that in a detailed manner. So first, understand the context of this particular article. The context is that recently in Maharashtra, a bill was passed. So the bill was Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024. So this particular bill is regularly in news. So that is Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024, right? So why Maharashtra Assembly is going to pass this Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024? So we will understand that. So in order to prevent the unlawful activities by individuals, by different organizations, and to curb the threat of the Naxalism and left-wing extremism and its supporters in the urban areas, the Maharashtra government decided to pass this particular bill, right? So I hope you have understood the reason behind this particular bill. So the reason behind Maharashtra Public Safety Act of 2024 was to prevent unlawful activities by individuals, organizations, and also curb the threat of left-wing extremism or Naxalism and even its supporters in the urban area. So that is the overall objective of passing this particular bill. Okay, so this particular bill intended to curb the threat of Naxalism and its supporters. There are number of supporters in the urban areas who actively extend their support to the left-wing extremism. So we will understand about this particular bill. So why Maharashtra government is going to pass this bill and what are the concerns with respect to the urban Naxalism, right? So Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act. So this will be a special Public Safety Act of 2024 essentially aimed to combat unlawful activities which are linked to Naxalism and its supporters in these urban areas, right? So when we talk about Naxalism, left-wing extremism. So left-wing extremism is influenced by the ideology of Mao. So it was influenced by the ideology of Mao and they very often use violent means and their overall objective is to overthrow the democratically elected government through violent means. So that is the overall objective of the left-wing extremism who are influenced by the ideology of Mao, and because of that reason, so they are known as either Naxalites or Maoists. Now why Maoists are called as Naxalites? Because in India, this Maoist movement or this movement was started in a place called Naxalbari in West Bengal, and Charu Majumdar was a person who is known as the precursor of this Naxalite movement in India, and because of that reason the people who are engaged in the left-wing extremism are also called as Naxalites or Maoists. So I hope you have understood this, and therefore Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024 essentially aims to combat the unlawful activities linked to Naxalism and its supporters in the urban areas. And in fact, this particular legislation of Maharashtra also categorizes people's involvement or organizations' involvement in violence and promoting fear among the public through their activities and even encouraging civil disobedience against the government, to established laws or the government which are considered as the unlawful by this particular piece of legislation. And in fact, so this Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024 has also mandated severe punishments for people who have been committing these unlawful activities, Naxalites, left-wing extremists, and even people who are supporting the left-wing extremism or the Naxalites. And in fact, all offences which are considered as offences or crime under the Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024 will be made cognizable and also non-bailable also as well. For example, imagine any individual is arrested under this particular legislation. So those crimes or arrested individual will not be having any right for the bail. So those crimes or offences considered as non-bailable, and they are also cognizable in nature. So in fact, which also comes with the penalties including imprisonment that has been ranging from 3 to 7 years and even fines between 3 to 5 lakh for joining the unlawful organizations, right? Now, so what is the need for this bill? Why Maharashtra state legislature brought this special public safety bill? So as I have already told you that the menace of Naxalism or left-wing extremism is prevalent in number of areas, right? So for example, you can see here it was prevalent in West Bengal, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, even Karnataka, Maharashtra. So across different states, it is still prevalent. So this menace of Naxalism is not only limited to the rural areas or remote areas in the Naxal affected states, so it is not just prevalent in rural areas, but its presence has also been substantially increasing in the urban areas through several Naxal frontal organizations. And because of that reason, this Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act 2024 also focused on individuals and organizations who have been doing unlawful activities and Naxalism, and people who are supporting the Naxalism will be covered under the unlawful activities under Maharashtra Special Public Safety Act of 2024. And in fact, the spread of these frontal organizations in urban areas who are supporting the Naxal groups actually gives, so these frontal organizations very often gives constant and effective support to the Naxalites or to the left-wing extremist groups. So in terms of they can provide logistics, they can help financially, materialistic support, and they are also providing safe refuge to their armed cadres. So all these things will be considered as offenses under this particular piece of legislation, right? So we will understand what exactly is the urban Naxalism, what is the menace of urban Naxalism. So urban Naxalism has actually emerged as a contentious issue in India. So in fact, it is considered as a contentious issue in India, and in fact, it is also a blend of social and political ideology with the security concerns or the national security, right? So it is a blend of social and political ideology with the national security concerns. And in fact, so this urban Naxalism essentially originate from the Maoist insurgency in rural India, particularly left-wing extremism or Naxalite movement. Remember, Naxalite movement can also be known as left-wing extremism. However, in recent times, urban Naxalism has represented a shift towards urban centers where sympathizers and ideologues facilitate Maoist activities. As I've already told you that Maoists, Naxalites or left-wing extremists, so they do violent acts, right? Killing politicians or killing the security personnel. So they do violent acts, violent activities. But these urban Naxals very often provide support, logistical support, provide refuge, provide materialistic support, financial support to these Naxalite groups, and that is a prime concern in India, right? So therefore, in order to curb urban Naxalism, this Maharashtra Special Public Safety Bill was recently passed by the Maharashtra State Legislative Assembly. So however, unlike the people who are in their rural areas, who engage in the armed struggle as left-wing extremists, Naxalites or Maoists, these urban Naxals, they operate covertly, they operate secretly. So their activities will not be revealed to anyone, right? So we can say that they are, doing underground activities. So most of these urban Naxals are educated, they are intellectuals, and there are number of cultural platforms in these urban areas also, and those cultural platforms will be used by these intellectuals who are also urban Naxals to propagate their ideology, to propagate their propaganda to the people, right? To infuse their ideology, these cultural platforms are being used by these urban Naxals to further promote their ideology, and they could also recruit more followers, and they could mobilize support, mobilize funding also, so thereby promoting the violence, thereby further encouraging Naxalites, right? So in fact, these urban Naxals very often exploit the democratic freedoms such as freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association to do all these things, to propagate their ideology, recruit their followers, and even mobilize the support, right? So they very often exploit the democratic freedoms such as freedom of speech and association to further their cause, and even they poses number of challenges to the law enforcement agencies in India. So however, there are number of factors which have been driving the urban naxalism. So what are the factors which are the major causes which have been driving the urban naxalism? So one and few things that we need to understand here. So one is socio-economic disparities that are widely prevalent. So we cannot deny the fact that as of now in India there are a huge inequalities, income inequalities, wealth inequalities, regional inequalities in terms of development, in terms of infrastructure. So therefore across India, all across India, we can say that there is a socio-economic disparities, and political corruption is another reason, and corporates extracting the resources and the benefits are not actually provided to the indigenous inhabitants. That is another major problem. So therefore economic inequalities and marginalized communities, there are a lot of economic inequalities, social inequalities, and apart from that there are also marginalized communities, and all these different sections of the people are actually they are feeling alienated, and they are also feeling neglected by the mainstream developmental policies, and that is the main reason, or that is the root cause of discontent and sympathy towards these radical ideologies such as left-wing extremism, Naxalism, and Maoism, right? So after that there is also a perceived injustice. So injustice in the sense that, for example, in the tribal areas, rural areas, or remote areas, illegal mining has been taking place. Politicians have been involved in the land grabbing. Corporates have been involved in the acquisition or encroachment of the forest areas and alienating the tribal people from their indigenous rights. So this is another factor that has been contributing to the rising discontent among the indigenous people. And this is one of the factor which very often compelling the people in those areas to support left-wing extremism. So very often they either join the left-wing extremism, and they can be messengers, and they provide refuge to these Naxalites because of corruption and the land acquisition, illegal mining, encroachment, land grabbing by corporates and politicians, and mistreatment of the indigenous tribal communities in their own habitats. And apart from that, the exploitation of tribals and tribal rights by the government, corporate. So all these factors have been contributing to a perceived injustice, a feeling of injustice among those people, right? So issues of land acquisition, displacement of tribal populations, and even alleged state repression in these conflict areas have been contributing to the grievances that urban Naxals can effectively exploit. And so after that, we need to talk about the intellectual and ideological influences of that further led to the rise in urban Naxals and their activities, right? So for example, there are certain intellectual circles and cultural platforms, universities and cultural spaces. So all these different platforms actually used to articulate their dissent, because most of them are intellectuals and they can easily mobilize the public support. They can make people more and more sympathetic towards the left-wing extremists or Naxalites. So these can be used as a platforms to express their dissent and criticizing the state, and sometimes they even align with or providing cover to the Naxalite activities as well. However, there are certain challenges with respect to dealing with the Naxalites, individuals, organizations who are supporting the Naxalites, and even these urban Naxals also. First and foremost, we need to think about the national security concerns. So urban Naxalism is very often viewed by these authorities as a threat to the national security due to its potential to incite violence against the state, civil disobedience against the laws which were passed by the state, and they can also undermine the authority, and over a period of time they can also destabilize the democratically elected government as well. So because of that reason, the national security concern, urban Naxalism is viewed as a national security concern. And even freedom of expression versus sedition. So Article 19 of the Indian Constitution guarantees freedom of speech and expression for every individual. However, so if any individual tries to incite violence disaffection against the government through speeches, signs, acts. So that can be considered as a sedition, right? So however, there is a very thin line between the freedom of expression and the sedition. That is, freedom of expression, we can say legitimate expression of dissent, and sedition. So it is often debated with the arrests of activists and intellectuals who are accused of supporting Naxalism, and that even raised concerns about the freedom of expression in recent times. So however, when we talk about the development as a cause and solution to the left-wing extremism or Naxalism, right? So how development can be a cause? So you can go through this. So there are solutions also, and distorted development very often promotes left-wing extremism or even Naxalism. And for that, inclusive development would be a better option to deal with the left-wing extremism. So one thing that we need to understand, development along with the security measures is very important to deal with the left-wing issue of left-wing extremism, right? So for example, effective implementation of schemes like Panchayat extension to scheduled areas, fifth schedule, and Forest Rights Act is very, very important in these left-wing extremist areas, because most of these areas are inhabited by the tribal people. And inclusive tribal governance such as tribal Panchshil introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru, promoting forest-based livelihood strategies, and MFP-based socio-economic development based on necessities of tribal. So all these things have to be kept in mind. So next important article, that is with respect to eFast India initiative. Right, so what exactly is the context of eFast India initiative, as it was launched by Niti Aayog? So recently, Niti Aayog has announced that it is going to launch Niti Gear Shift Challenge as part of eFast India initiative, right? So this eFast India initiative was already launched by the Niti Aayog, right? So it was already launched by the Niti Aayog, but within the part of eFast India initiative, Niti Aayog going to launch Niti Gear Shift Challenge. So we will understand what is this eFast India initiative and Niti Gear Shift Challenge. Right. So eFast was born from the recognition of the urgent need to decarbonize road-based freight transportation and also achieving the net zero commitment by 2070. So we all knew that COP26 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So one of the commitment was India will become net zero by 2070. However, the transportation sector is one of the key contributor of the greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, and therefore, so one of the objectives of green growth or green development is that we need to decarbonize the road-based freight transportation. So therefore, eFast was born from the recognition of these two requirements. Okay, so it was also launched by the Niti Aayog in September 2022. And in fact, this eFast India initiative aims to galvanize transition towards cleaner and greener freight transportation. So we can say that electric vehicles, battery recharge infrastructure, so all these things would comes under the eFast India initiative of the Niti Aayog. So this eFast India initiative is a platform that will facilitate deliberation, discussions, debates, and even collaborations between different stakeholders, including the government, original equipment manufacturers, logistics service providers, shippers, industry experts. So overall, to enable development and adaptation of the electric technology in freight sector at a huge scale. So what is this Niti Gear Shift Challenge, as it is part of as it is part of eFast initiative, right? So it is part of eFast initiative of Niti Aayog. So this Niti Gear Shift Challenge. So again, it was launched by the Niti Aayog in collaboration with IIM Bangalore and Smart Freight Center India and Class Start or Drive to Zero and World Resources Institute India. So it is a collaborative collaboration or collaborative initiative between all these different organizations, right? So this is, we can say that this is a innovation hackathon. So this particular hackathon aims to foster innovation or innovative business models for the adoption of zero emission trucks in India, and thereby addressing the nation's pressing economic and environmental challenges over a period of time, and decarbonize the transportation sector, and also achieve the commitment of net zero by 2070. So this Niti Aayog Gear Shift Challenge actually invites students, academia, transport service practitioners, academics, researchers to develop innovative business models, so that could essentially address financial, technical and operational challenges in the adoption of electric trucks over a period of time, right? So that is the Niti Gear Shift Challenge of the Niti Aayog, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.